I'm ready.
I sent the bio for Onishi.
Great.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, December 30th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report podcast. We are broadcasting live.
Where did that come from?
Majority Report show? What?
Podcast.
I've already forgotten. We've been out of... we are broadcasting live to tape steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. It is our best of shows.
Yes.
What is it? How do I usually start the show?
I don't really know.
Well, 5-time award-winning
Majority Report, but you don't add the podcast.
I don't know why I said that.
I don't know.
It's, you know, we had Christmas a couple of days ago, as you're aware of. Hanukkah's already started, so happy Hanukkah to everybody. And I'm just out of sorts. Once you get out of the rhythm of doing the show. Now, with that said,
right. Well, I mean,
we actually recorded this in the past.
We just recorded the show, so you really don't have that excuse. I don't think you're fooling anybody with this.
I'm trying to fool people. I've already expressed to my therapist that I think it's possible I'm getting early onset dementia.
Interesting.
Because there's some words I can't access.
Right.
And I add words. I can't tell you how many times on this break I have added the word podcast to just conversations that have nothing to do with it, past the podcast roast.
And that's Sam's word of the day.
On the program today, it's our best of. We continue our best of the show this year.
Of the year.
Brad Onishi, writer, co-host of the Straight White American Jesus podcast, founder of Axis Mundi Media, author of Preparing for War, The Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism and What Comes Next. What's coming next is not necessarily great. And this is from July 8th of 2024. Again, reminder, our best of sort of best practices is we do not consider any shows in November or December as the best of for that year because people have just heard it.
Right.
And so we want to remind people of the shows in the year that we did past. And of course, we're gearing up for next year. We should also say, I hope you had a Merry Christmas, although we've said that in past future shows that we're doing. I don't know. I get very confused with the time-space continuum with this. After Brad Onishi, Matt may or may not have put YouTube clips.
A little surprise.
Best of. So it's a little bit of surprise. It is according to him, it's not an Easter egg, but we'll call it like a New Year's egg. Because we're getting close to New Year's. Egg, also a symbol for change and rejuvenation. Spring. We're not near spring. I don't know why I brought that up. Folks, enjoy this interview with Brad Onishi. Anything that Emma?
No.
We were recording this in the past, and it's actually
I've never heard you ramble more in your life, and we
too far into the future.
Yeah.
In the past for Emma, and she wants to get out of here. So this interview with Brad Onishi, and then we'll have some YouTube clips. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. A pleasure to welcome to the program Brad Onishi, the writer, co-host of the Straight White American Jesus podcast, founder of Axis Mundi Media, a professor at the University of San Francisco, and author of his second book. Is it your second, I believe?
It is. Yeah.
Preparing for War, the extremist history of white Christian nationalism and what comes next. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I did not realize let's start with this. The idea of Christian nationalism, what's the because we've had a strong sort of extremist, if you will, or fundamentalist Christian presence in this country for decades, maybe a decade and a half, two decades now, almost, not decades, centuries. But when did it turn into a full-on Christian nationalist movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those questions where, we could zero in on decades going back to the 1600s, the 1700s. I mean, we can really talk about the centuries of American and pre-American history, colonial history, and so on. For me, what's helpful is this: if we turn to the 1960s, we see great change in the country. We see a civil rights movement. We see the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, everything from Stonewall to the attempts to get the ERA passed. That's a moment when many conservative Christians in the country, especially many white conservative Christians in the country, don't see progress. They don't see the country living up to its promise to be a more perfect union. Instead, they see that as that's when we lost our country. That's when it was given to those who don't deserve it. That's when rights and representation were afforded to people who are not perhaps real Americans and should not be trusted with the country's destiny going forward.
And so where I didn't realize this, it sort of I guess ballooned into a movement in where you grew up. Let's talk a little bit first about your personal journey, because it gets interwoven here with the rise of this movement.
Sure. So I grew up in Southern California, and I grew up in Orange County. And I know that for most folks around the country, California, they picture California as a liberal bastion where we, the Democratic Party has a supermajority and so on and so forth, right? We teach our kids Das Kapital in kindergarten or something. The reality is it's a much more mixed political landscape. And Orange County in particular in the mid-20th century became what the Harvard historian Lisa McGurr called the epicenter of American conservatism. Orange County is a funny place. After World War II, it was the center, the central nervous system for the American defense industry. So in the decades, 60s, 70s, 80s, you have millions and millions and millions of Southerners and Midwesterners who migrate to places like Orange County. Now, they don't see themselves as transplants trying to figure out how to fit into a new place. They're implants. They're going to bring their culture, their life, and their religious ethos with them. And they're going to do so unmoored from all of the histories and the sedimentation of where they came from. In Pittsburgh, you might have Jewish neighborhoods. You might have large and historic Black neighborhoods. Well, in Anaheim, California, in 1965, you don't have any of that. So you see this sort of distilled form of white Christian conservatism take root in Orange County. And that's what I was born into and grew up in the 1980s. That's where I converted to evangelical Christianity as a teenager. I was ushered into a whole religious political landscape that to me at the time felt normal, but I realized later was really a kind of a central node in the development of what we now call white Christian nationalism. And if you do the history, you see it. You see that this is the region that gave birth to Richard Nixon, my hometown, Richard Nixon's hometown. This is the place that championed Barry Goldwater more than any other in Southern California and in California in general. This is the place that was really Ronald Reagan's spiritual home and named its airport after John Wayne. So, you start to look into it and you realize the deep roots of American conservatism, and somehow they unexpectedly take you back to Southern California.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a couple of actually interviews about the birth of conservatism, or at least the movement conservatism coming out of California. I mean, it ties in also to the medical profession. There was a lot happening in car dealerships. I mean, there's a lot of different narratives there. What I'm fascinated is the idea of this the distillation of for lack of a better, I keep calling it Christian nationalism, but was it Christian nationalism when it got there? Like the idea that this is a completely blank canvas. Yeah. California, very big country. A lot of people, the whole story about California for much of at least the first half of the 20th century was, we're going out there and I'm starting my life anew in many respects for various reasons that we saw, the Great Depression, but also because it's just so far away from their relatives, far away from legal problems, whatever it was. It's a blank canvas out there. But what was there Christian nationalist? Christian nationalists desires before it got there, or did things sort of coalesce there and become more concentrated and virulent?
Yeah. I mean, let's I think the answer is both and I think if we start with this idea that Christian nationalism in its essence is a fusion of the Christian and American identity, the idea that to be a Christian means to be an American, and to be an American, a real American, one needs to be a Christian, right? Those are just a basic working idea of Christian nationalism, that Americanism and Christian identity go together, and that if you separate them, you're left with something that for folks who adhere to this ideology and worldview feels incomplete. Now, folks who are migrating from Georgia, from Pennsylvania in the 50s and 60s, are they going there saying, you know what, I just wish I could be a virulent white Christian nationalist. It's time to get the family in the station wagon and head west? I don't think so. But my argument would be those places had long and deep histories, both religiously, ethnically, and politically, that were different from Southern California. So again, if I'm in Pittsburgh, I'm surrounded by neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods, Jewish neighborhoods, Italian, Polish. I'm surrounded by Catholic folks and other folks, right? So this means that there's a check on my ability politically and religiously to sort of distill this pure white Christian nationalism into my community. There's just things getting in my way to do that. When you get to Southern California in the 1960s, 1970s, all of those things are not there. Those main streets, they're not there. You know what is there? Burgeoning mega churches, where folks are realizing, preachers are realizing, if I combine just vehement anti-communism with all these people who have jobs at defense industry plants, anti-communism, pro-capitalism, pro-individual, you know what that equals? The gospel of Jesus Christ. If I put all that together, now all of a sudden I get a religious and political set of elements that fuse into something that is not only, what I would call white Christian nationalist, but it's unchecked by all those foundational components on the main streets where these folks left. And that's why I think you're able to see this distillation, this petri dish of a conservative movement based on the idea that Christianity and America go together, form in this region of the country.
Well, I'm reminded of Zionism when you're talking a little bit. I mean, there's like this notion that we're migrating to this place. It's a fusion of national identity with religious identity, and one that ends up in a kind of militant right-wing ideology. It makes sense a little bit why Christian nationalists also are such virulent Zionists as well.
There certainly is. And there's this sense, and I think this is something that's important here about land and territory that plays into this. One of the things we're seeing out of some of the most, I think, disturbing strains of Christian nationalism right now is an emphasis on Volk and homeland. Those are words that are quotes from like very popular Christian nationalist manifestos that are being read by pastors and seminarians as we speak. So this emphasis on land and people, coupled with a story of Israel as a kind of chosen place, and America superimposed it's the Israelite story onto its own, you really do get a mix that leads to a Christian Zionism, past and present.
I want to move to your personal journey for a moment, and then broaden back out again. But before we do, which values come from where? In other words, like, it's a combination of Christianity and American national, but it's a specific vision of what America is based upon where these people are coming from. It's a very conservative, I think, white supremacy based, patriarchal. Like, which part is American and which part is Christian? Like, I understand the way that it's been fused, but was it always fused? Can we delineate which came from where?
I think we make a mistake if we get up in the morning and we think of the political realms and the religious realms as these, separate domains that sometimes interact. That sometimes there's this Venn diagram of religion overlapping with politics. I think it's more helpful to think of them as co-generative. One of the words that the religious right used back in the 70s and 80s, when it was the religious right and not Christian nationalism in terms of terminology, they would call themselves co-belligerents, right? That they were like stirring up and agitating together as political entrepreneurs and as pastors. And that's how I would think about it. I would think about it like if you take someone like Jerry Falwell, one of the progenitors of the religious right in the 1970s, what he's doing in the late 1970s is he's going around the country on a tour, but it's not a religious revival tour. It's called I Love America. He's holding rallies saying I love America, like there's a gospel choir. And at the end of those rallies, he has an altar call for America. And so I guess for me, the more helpful way to think about it is that for the majority of white Christians, they've never really cultivated a Christianity that has been separated from a sense of Americanism or nationalism. Now, at times, there have been forces that have tamped that down, that have unraveled it, that have put the jets, cooled the jets. But as we've seen in the last decade, there's also been times of deep cultivation and activation and, dare I say, acceleration. And so I don't think it's one influencing the other as much as two symbiotic elements growing together to reach what I think now is a pretty destructive force in American society.
I think it's difficult for like secular type people to conceive of it this way, almost in the same way. I mean, I make this argument about, misogynists and racists don't see themselves as holding two different, I'm a misogynist and a racist. It's no, I don't like people who are other than me and not conforming to my notion of hierarchy. But there was a time where there was a sensibility, at least amongst some cohort of fundamentalists, leave unto Caesar that which is of Caesar. We stay in our sacred world. We don't involve in the profane world. When did that? I mean, I know that Jerry Falwell was largely, and Paul Weyrich and these folks were largely responsible for bridging that divide. But was it hard for the congregation to join them, or was that because it feels like the system is set up in such a way that, like, unlike a more secular, a group of people, turning their direction in one way or another is like, is herding cats or changing a flight deck. But one of the advantages that I would imagine a Christian community has is the pastor stands up and says, that stuff that we were believing yesterday, I found out last night it was wrong. And so today, this is what we believe.
I think there's some of that at play. I think one of the ways to think about it, and I think the sociological data shows this, is whether it's the 1970s and Jerry Falwell, or whether it's 2020s and the MAGA movement and its fusion with white Christian nationalists. Christian nationalists are motivated to enter the political sphere in force when they feel their cultural identity is under threat. So let what Caesar's be unto Caesar is a lot easier when you feel like you're Caesar implicitly, right? Which means white Christians are the leaders in Congress and in the White House. They're the people on TV. They're the people who control what's going on culturally, economically. And again, why would I start my book in the 60s? Because that's a moment when you see all of a sudden a civil rights movement, a women's rights movement, a Stonewall that starts to threaten the white Christian and starts to make them feel as if they are under threat to be a minority in the country. But that has only accelerated over the last 50 years to the point where we got to 2016 and the election of Trump. And so I guess what I would say here is, how do you get those white Christians motivated to march, to rally, to protest at Planned Parenthood? You convince them that they're going to be replaced. You convince them that they're under threat. You convince them that the government hates God. Even though Joe Biden goes to mass like 3 times a day, you convince them that there's never been a Democrat who's ever been a religious person, and so on and so forth. And that sense of threat is a great motivator, whether it's in the 60s and 70s protesting the civil rights movement, whether it is protesting Obergefell, whether it's trying to put an abortion ban in place. It's all based on that sense of we will be replaced if we don't act, and we need to act now in order to save our country and ourselves.
And I'm fascinated by the usage of religious iconography and justifications and grafting that onto political realities, whether it be Southern California is Eden, or whether it be Donald Trump is sacrificing himself for our sins, and he's an imperfect vessel for our political goals. That is so I mean, if you could just explain that, as someone who grew up secular, the usage of those religious modes of thinking and applying it to politics.
We really see this at January 6th. A lot of so many of my colleagues, religion scholars, have done great work in addition to what we've done on our show to point out the deep and wide religious symbology at January 6th. Christian flags, Appeal to Heaven flags, Proud Boys wearing patches with the Psalms quoted on them, icons of Mary, statues of Jesus, prayer circles. Why? And I think the response with January 6th, and I think in general to your question, Emma, is that there's a sense when you invite people into a story that has a sense of transcendence, a cosmic significance, you're able to mobilize them in a way that perhaps you couldn't, without it. As Sam said, on the left, there's often this pluralistic and diverse coalition that has a hard time agreeing. Well, if you invite people into a cosmic story that says we have to act now, that Donald Trump is not just a candidate who maybe likes some of the policies you like, but he's been chosen by God to save this country from a woke globalist apocalypse. You're able to usher some folks into a movement and usher them in with urgency that you might not have without those religious or pious symbols. And so I think they have a really important function in these movements, past and present.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the Democrats are trying to do a similar thing in terms of saying that he's an existential threat. It's a lot harder to do because we do not have a framework for any of it. And we don't have those, we don't have that natural cohesiveness. And that we don't have the sort of accoutrements, I guess, to maintain that. Is it, when these directives come down, how much of it is, who's the policeman? Is it God? I know it's even just, I know the act of sort of pulling these strains apart is conceptually not how it works. It's really just a way for us to understand. But how much of it is God, or is it, that the vehicle for God is my pastor, or is it the community? Mm-hmm. When I go to, to dinner, or I go to friend's house, where are the different forces of maintaining discipline?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's helpful is to think about something like Christian nationalism as an identity and as living out a story. That if we do what my first year students do all the time and say, hey, religion's about belief, right? We're just going to learn about what Hindus believe and what Buddhists believe. We kind of get off track, because what it's really about is an identity that gives people a character to play. There's some data out there that shows us that there's many people who haven't been to church in a long time who will tell you in a survey that they think the federal government should declare this a Christian nation, that They believe our laws should be based on the Bible. And yet you say, that's great, Jeff. When's the last time you went to church? And they say, can't remember, maybe 2020, right? And so what that tells me is this is about an identity and a story to play. Well, then the question I think you're asking, Sam, is, well, how do I plug into that story, right? How do I plug in and play a part? And what we're finding increasingly is, yes, it's pastors and churches. They're important. But those pastors and churches are just part of a kind of a network of voices. And those voices are, across the media landscape. They're across the political landscape. So one of those is going to be Trump and his MAGA lieutenants. Others are going to be the Charlie Kirks and the Ben Shapiros and the others in the right-wing media. And so by the time somebody enters church on a Sunday, there's a really good chance they've had 8 or 10 podcasts, YouTube channels, other outlets, Fox News and Newsmax, that have informed their understanding not only of politics, but of religion. And so if their pastor doesn't confirm that, what we're finding is they often are just going to find a new pastor. So if you're a pastor in this day and age, even if you're not a hardcore MAGA person, you really have to make a choice. Do I get on board, save my job, probably get a couple hundred more people in the door on a Sunday? Or do I disagree, take a stand, and probably find myself without a job or a career and just kind of have to start over, even though I'm 48 and I've never done anything else? So I guess my point here is I think we need to see the cultivation of this discipline and this worldview as multifaceted, but it's all sort of disciplined by, are you on board with it as understood as a broad conservatism outlined by Trump and the elites at hand, and those come down to family, they come down to gender, they come down to immigration, they come down to sex, and those have been raised to the level of doctrine, right?
It's fascinating though to me that and I get the idea that okay, it's not just Charlie Kirk is more relevant to me than my pastor if I'm a Christian. It's Charlie Kirk and Fox and Friends, and Matt Walsh and whatever. I've watched all these, and so that's my sense of reality.
Yep.
That comes crashing up against what my pastor may say, but the pastor's supposed to have a more direct line. It's fascinating to me that the pastor has to bend. I mean, you see this all the time. You see this in all religions. I've known people who've been rabbis at big temples, and they're like, I couldn't handle it but part of it was, certain ideological things in the past. And I imagine that happens, but it's not so much, it's usually one thing. It's fascinating to me that, so here's my question then for you is, how did you break out of it or fall out of it? I mean, it's less, it's more, it seems to me that's more of a question of how you drop out of it than you do drop into it.
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, I converted at 14 and I was a pastor by age 20 as a full-time minister.
Wait, why did you convert at age 14?
Well, I got invited to church by my girlfriend, and my thought was it's Wednesday night, and
now
my girlfriend. So it's Wednesday night. There's no way mom's letting me out of the house. I've been getting in a lot of trouble. So if I tell her I'm going to church, she's going to say yes because she thinks that's going to straighten me out. My plan was find girlfriend. Once we get to church, sneak off into the field, make out, and then then church is a good deal for me. What happened was I had this incredibly extreme conversion. I met all these folks at the mega church that convinced me that God would forgive me and provide me eternal life, and that this was the answer to all my existential questions. And so I was the kind of kid by the time I was 15 or 16 that told my mom, I don't want Christmas presents. I want you to spend any money you're gonna spend on Bibles for people in Nepal or elsewhere because they've never heard of Jesus, right? So I really went from this kid in a non-religious setting to an extreme convert. I was completely devoted. So by the time I'm 20, I'm a minister and I'm married to my high school sweetheart, and I'm getting ready for seminary.
She the one that you went to the church with?
No, the one that invited me to church dumped me like very quickly after. I mean, she could tell I was choosing Jesus and not her. She right. Saw the writing on the wall.
You got too into it, Brad.
Yeah, I blew it. Yeah. So she dumped me, but Jesus didn't. And I stuck around. And so all that to say, I'm not somebody who just had some interaction with this culture. I was a foot soldier. I was a completely devoted disciple. The problem for me is my mind is way too active, and I started to read. I wanted to understand the ins and outs of our doctrine, of our history. I wanted to understand where we came from and how and why we got to where we were. And then things started happening like 9/11. And 9/11 happens. And in my church, this brings out Americanism in a way I'd never seen before. And it was not that I wasn't mourning and traumatized along with so many other Americans at what happened on 9/11. It was that it started to feel like our religion was more about the American flag than the cross that was in the front of the church. And so that was a moment of like, why did 9/11 lead to something like Iraq and Afghanistan and all of that? I remember wanting to vote for John Kerry and not George W. Bush the second time around. I told my elders at the church I was going to do that, and they said, that's cute. We're glad you think John Kerry's going to help people with education or healthcare, but he's for abortion, and that means he's a murderer. Do you want to be a murderer? And I was old enough by then, in my early 20s, to say, this can't be the only way. Like, we can't reduce the most fundamental questions of human life to like either or, can we? Like, there have to be theologians and mystics and philosophers who've done this in a way that's more complex. So instead of becoming a missionary like everyone wanted to, I went off to England to go to graduate school at Oxford. And when I got there, I was unmoored, just like many of those folks from Orange County before me. There was nothing holding me in place. I was able to read and think and really explore intellectually every avenue I wanted to go down. And I realized very quickly that the gospel I'd been converted into was a gospel as much about an American story than it was about Jesus Christ. And so that led me on a path of a much different kind of worldview.
Your story is both sort of like, is fascinating, but it's also, it's a little bit depressing.
Yeah.
In the sense that, your average person in any sector of life does not have that level of curiosity. Or, on some level, it sounds like your Christian nationalism was done in by your purity to Christianity, and combined with a curious intellect. That's not your average person in anywhere. So like it doesn't suggest that there's an easy way out of this for a lot of people.
I think that, so I think you're right, but I think here's where I take hope. I went back to Orange County just about a year ago to talk about my book, and I met with so many people I used to know at my former church, and they're not those that are at graduate school. These are folks who are just going to work and raising their kids. And so many of them said, hey, I'm so glad you wrote this book because I left 5 years ago. I left in 2016 after Trump. I left when George Floyd was murdered, and I saw the reactions to my church to that set of events. So I think there is hope in knowing that there are run-of-the-mill people out there who are saying to themselves, what I've learned about my Christianity doesn't line up with Trumpism or the xenophobia or racism or et cetera that I'm witnessing in my religious space. So I think one of the things that's easy to do is despair and think that Christian nationalism is this sort of majority force in this country. It's far from that in terms of numbers. And there are many who left after 2016. I think the problem is there's a lot more who are being seduced into it by way of patriarchy, xenophobia, and misogyny and nationalism to kind of reinforce some of the pews and those churches. So I think there is hope, but I think there's also reason to be incredibly fearful about what's ahead.
Well, give us some of those numbers, because I have to say, just because we like to do a little doom casting around here. I don't think you need a majority, frankly.
Of course not.
I think you need a very virulent small minority, and almost definitionally, we're talking about that type of sort of mentality. Like it doesn't take much of like people who are sort of really invested to make a big change in this country, and particularly in this era of minoritarian rule. So give us a sense of numbers, but also talk to me about, like, my sense was that Mike Pence was, prior to Mike Johnson, the most powerful theocrat, Christian nationalist that this country has ever had in terms of, like, an elected official. And that he served Trump in two different ways. One, to represent the establishment and at least the sort of the business community through the Koch brothers network that he was very, very heavily invested in and invested of, I guess. But also, he was the one who delivered the evangelical Christian nationalist vote. Does Trump need him anymore? Like, how is that vote being delivered? Bush needed the marriage equality amendments in 2004 to win a majority. Trump needed Pence, it seems to me, to get to at least to win the electoral vote. What's going to fill that gap this time around for Trump? And give us a sense of numbers in terms of what we're talking about.
Sure. So we have, in 2016, we have just about 80% of white evangelicals vote for Donald Trump. We have about a majority of white Catholics. So that gives you a sense of the demographic. Now, in 2020, that goes up. So more white evangelicals voted for Trump by percentage, at least, in 2020. So,
but did the raw numbers of evangelicals who voted? I mean, I imagine, particularly at that time, I'm not surprised to hear that the percentage of those who voted did, but did the raw numbers of those people grow in the same, consistent with the increase in the percentages?
Yeah, the answer is complicated, but I think this is part of what we're seeing in 2024 is a shift on the part of Trump and many leading lights in the Christian nationalist movement. Dutch Sheets, Lance Wallnau, Charlie Kirk, they are really focused on Black, Latino, and Asian Christians because they feel like they've maxed out some of that white Christian vote. Like, you can only get so much of that group. And those numbers are not necessarily growing. There's numbers out there that actually tell us that the numbers of white evangelicals in the country have gone down. What does that mean? It means there's no accident you're seeing an increase. All these news stories, all the coverage of Black voters for Trump, of an increased Latino vote for Trump, of an increased Asian American vote for Trump. That's due to a strategic targeting of those folks. And how are they doing it? Well, they're offering a Christianity based on patriarchy, based on quote unquote family values, based on gender hierarchy, based on there's only two genders and so on. So the point I think here is 2024 is a moment where you're seeing them realize if we can peel off some of those people of color and Black voters, that's where we're gonna backfill, and that's where we're gonna perhaps increase our voter reach. So I think that's answer number one. I completely agree that you only need a minority. Like, if you look at the numbers from Pew or PRRI, we're talking about 30 to 40% of the country score as Christian nationalists in some way. They appear on what we would call the Christian nationalist spectrum. My colleague Paul Jupe, however, at Denison University, found in a recent study that about 9 to 10% of Americans believe only Christians should be citizens. He found that 14% of Americans believe that the church should have a veto on the government's policies. The thing about the groups we're talking about today, and I think, Sam, you already know this, and the audience probably already knows this, they vote in incredibly high numbers. Right? They don't stay home. These are not folks who are going to sit it out and protest. These are not folks who are going to say, I just don't think I'm going to be there this time. I have to run errands. I can't make it to the polls. These are people who vote in numbers that are well beyond the average American group. And so you only need a minority. Once you factor in gerrymandering, once you factor in voter suppression, you really do have a recipe where 30% of the country can dictate what happens for everybody.
What's the strategy? I mean, are you aware of what the strategy is or the tactics? Because I think, like, the idea that they talk about, Blacks for Trump, what they're really saying is specific Black Christians for Trump. Mm-hmm. And Latino voters, we're playing on the conservatism there. I mean, I think, like, frankly, the biggest, we're in the midst, obviously, Harris or Biden as the candidate. I think the idea of Harris as a candidate, I think the rewards outweigh the risk, or the potential rewards, or the risks are less than they are with Biden at this point. But one of them certainly is the fact that Harris is a woman, and this is going to, that even more than the fact that she's black, in my estimation, is going to motivate a different cohort of people than would have otherwise voted to vote against her, because the idea of having a woman as being in charge is so antithetical to that some of these sort of like that will appeal to the cohort of Christians that Trump himself could not.
It will. I mean, Kamala Harris is like made in a lab to scare the white Christian nationalists. I mean, Barack Obama
to scare the white ones, without a doubt. But they're already going to vote, it seems to me, in those numbers. I'm talking about Latino communities, and even perhaps black communities, although I would imagine like Latino communities, there would be more inspiration there. The idea of a female president. Sure.
I mean, well, I don't want to deliberate too much on Kamala Harris's presidency, her presidential candidacy that could or could not manifest. I will say she's a complicated figure in many ways, complex for a lot of folks. She represents the United States in its best form. She's a mixed race person. She's a black person. She's an Asian American person. She has a Jewish husband. I mean, this is America in 2024. For others, that's going to be used against her. It's going to be used against her even in some of those minority ethnic communities. So I think that's a reality. I think the answer, though, to your central question, Sam, is really this. How do you convince the black church, the Latino church to vote for Donald Trump, given his stance on the border, on immigration, on race in general, the Central Park Five, whatever it may be? And I think the answer is, let's look to people who we see in front of us. Byron Donalds, Herschel Walker, folks like this. The key here is to emphasize, what do you want for your country? Do you want a country built with strong men, strong families, based on a husband and a wife, men and women, no pronouns, no non-binary, whatever that means? Do you want to have groomers and perverts in your schools, or do you just want to have a candidate who will support what is the right kind of sex, the right kind of marriage, the right kind of love? Do you want that kind of country over there with the rainbow flag and the gender spectrum? Or do you want strong men leading you into an uncertain future where we are at threat in every turn? That's the sell. The sell is lean on the patriarchy, lean on the gender structure, lean on the sense of the otherness that you talked about earlier. Who is other than me? Well, the people who are lesbian, gay, non-binary, the people who are trans, they're more other than you than the folks who are telling you that Joe Biden is better for the person of color. Be more afraid of them, be more angry at them. And that works in many of these churches. It works in many of these spaces. And so that's the sell. And that's the play.
That's why they call her the DEI. That's why the Post, I think, called her the DEI Barbie. Or
they couldn't print the N word. So
but the point is that by saying the DEI Barbie instead of the N word, they can then sort of appeal to people of color and say, like, she still represents alienness. Well, even though in some areas, I mean, and that's the point, is that they've been able to sort of like convert slightly the terminology so that it can apply. It's sort of like a all-purpose racist otherization that can work, meet the sort of the bigot where they are in some way. Well, I have one also final question, because this, I think, plays a very big part in what we're seeing with the Supreme Court, is Opus Dei. My understanding is that Scalia and Alito, at least, are Opus Dei, that Leonard Leo, who is the who has orchestrated essentially the Supreme Court via the Federalist Society for a couple of decades. Also Opus Dei. I know that Kudlow, I think, is also who was Trump's chief advisor. How does Opus Dei play with this Christian nationalism? Are they just cousins, essentially?
No, they're. I think one of the things that I've tried to get across over the last few months is that radical traditional Catholicism, right? This very overwhelmingly conservative strain of Catholicism, of which Opus Dei is a major part in that ecosystem, is at the center of what we now understand the Christian nationalist movement in this country and everything that's happening at the Supreme Court, as well as Project 2025. So let me lay it out. The Heritage Foundation is behind Project 2025. Who starts the Heritage Foundation? Paul Weyrich. Paul Weyrich was a radical traditionalist Catholic. After Vatican II, he started going to a church that where the mass was in Greek because he couldn't stand the vernacular. He broke with his own church because he thought they were too liberal. If you look at the life of Paul Weyrich, he is a strict male supremacist. He's a Christian supremacist, and he is somebody who believes that a dominant patriarch should be the head of the house, the church, and the government. Who is now in charge of the Heritage Foundation? Kevin Roberts, also a traditional Catholic. Okay, so there's a long lineage of the Heritage Foundation having this vision of Christian supremacism. They believe Christ is king, not in religious pluralism. They believe that their Christian values should be infused throughout the government without any question. They believe that male leadership is the way to go, period. So it's no accident to me that Kevin Roberts gets out there in public the other day after the immunity ruling and says, if the left will allow it, we'll have a bloodless revolution. That's a traditional Catholic leading in the lineage of Paul Weyrich, who is articulating that they are so excited for a unified executive in the vision of Project 2025, where a male patriarch will have almost complete control of the executive branch and perhaps the entire government. It's also what we're seeing in SCOTUS. So one of the arguments I made in Politico a couple months ago is that the IVF rulings represent the Catholicization of American sexual ethics, that evangelicals in the 60s were not against abortion. Evangelicals up until recently were not against IVF. But IVF and abortion have been traditionalist Catholic issues for a long, long time. So when you see the Alabama Supreme Court ruling on IVF, or you see the Southern Baptist Convention condemn IVF, they're doing so at the influence of those traditionalist Catholics you're mentioning, the folks who are not only affiliated with Opus Dei, but who are running the Federalist Society, and in many ways are driving the conversation about gender and sex within those with those communities. So if there has ever been a moment of overwhelmingly conservative Catholic forces dominating our politics, it is now, whether you look at the Supreme Court or Project 2025. Project 2025, in its essence, is a rad trad fever dream.
So not cousins, more like grandfathers, fathers of
leaders of the household.
How do they manage to be like? I would say that 70% of what we've talked about, our audience is familiar with in some fashion or another. But I would say there's a much smaller group of people who are, Opus Dei we were talking about Opus Dei more in the aughts.
Yep.
Than we are today. I think Novak, who is a Washington Post writer and was on Crossfire, was Opus Dei. But it seems to like they got the message. And Opus Dei has always sort of been a little bit secretive, as far as I understand. But they got the message that like we need to recede at least. I mean, has that happened? And how has that happened? And how conscious of that was that?
Well, I think there's a sense there of sometimes less is more. Sometimes less name recognition is more. I mean, I think we're seeing this with Trump and Project 2025, right? You're seeing more and more Americans understand what Project 2025 is. So he comes out with this incoherent rant about how he has no idea what it is and he doesn't believe any of it. Well, if you don't know what it is, how do you know you don't believe it? He's just basically trying to do, damage control. It's the same with Opus Dei. If we recede into the background, right? slowly, drip by drip, what we see over the course of the aughts and the Obama years is so much funding, so much network building, right? So much political influence coming into cultivation. By the time we get to the Trump years, it's the Federalist Society who picks us 3 judges, right? By the time we get to 2022, 23, 24, we have people like the Southern Baptist Convention and a Supreme Court justice in Alabama condemning IVF. I mean, that is an overwhelming victory for the likes, not only of Opus Dei, but anyone in that traditional Catholic universe. They feel enormous victory, and I dare say enormous momentum right now. Leonard Leo's at a place where he's like, I got the court.
He's got $1 billion. People have forgotten this, but he was given $1 billion with a B dollars to basically go be an authoritarian entrepreneur. Wherever you can push this agenda, do it.
We've already got the court in his mind. That's what he's thinking. And so let's go get the state legislatures and let's go get Congress. I mean, and make Congress even worse than it is now. I mean,
well, that controversy, just to add to it, with the kicker from the Kansas City Chiefs, Harrison Butker, that he was speaking at a college where Leonard Leo has connections and has donated, as well as Josh Hawley, having connections to that too.
Leo was the commencement speaker the year before.
Yep.
Right. So here we have Harrison Butker, 28-year-old kicker, and the year before it was Leonard Leo. And so I think that, I mean, it just follows along everything you're saying, Emma.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. And
good thing the Democrats are in a great position to beat this back right now.
This is your cue, Brad, to say something like, "Oh, but here's the good story."
Well, I mean, look, I mean, I think for me, here's a couple things we could take away. Perhaps is we got news of stunning left center victories in France over the last couple of days. Yeah. Labour is in power in the UK, and the Tories are gone after 14 years. Whether we look to places like Mexico or the pushback on Modi in India, there are people across the world saying no to fascism. And I think for me, the hope lies in a message that says, look, Biden, Harris, whomever, we have a chance to say no to fascism. We have a chance to say no to totalitarianism. And there are people across the world who've already signaled that they understand the threat and they're doing the same. So, yeah, I'm not going to prognosticate, and I'm never going to take the foot off the gas of trying to reveal to people just what a dire situation we face right now, because we do. But there's always hope, and hope springs from organizing and togetherness. And if people are willing to like rub shoulders with other human beings, you often feel a sense of momentum and a sense of hope grow. And so that's my encouragement. Go do one thing you don't usually do. And don't sit on the sidelines as we kind of descend into what could be a summer of despair.
Brad Onishi, writer, co-host of the Straight White American Jesus podcast, founder of Axis Mundi Media, author of Preparing for War, The Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism and What Comes Next. We will put a link to that book at majority.fm and in the podcast and YouTube description. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Thanks, Brad.
Oh, this is a great story. Lauren Windsor, who I know we've played some of the audio that she has recorded in the past. She goes around to a lot of these Republican functions. Sometimes she'll put on like a Southern accent, yes, which apparently is very effective.
She's genius.
But she will attend these functions. She'll pay for them. She'll use her real name, go to the function, and go up and to be fair, pretend that she's a fan of some of these people and act supportive and get them to talk on the record. And she has done this at a Supreme Court gala last week. What was the name of the gala?
It was for the Supreme Court Historical Society.
The Supreme Court Historical Society. And all the bigwigs were there.
Yeah.
And she paid for her ticket. She went, like I say, in her own name. And she first approached, I don't know what the order in which she did these things, but I don't know if she did Roberts first or she did Alito and his wife first, but it doesn't matter. Let's play the clip from John Roberts, because I am not a fan of John Roberts. I should just tell you, full disclosure. I don't pull up a flag, let's put it that way, in front of my house or my apartment to show my disdain for John Roberts. But here is John Roberts in what I think the people there felt like would be a off-the-record moment, probably, right? There's no reason to... She's recording the device. She doesn't have a microphone in her hand. Somehow she records it. We're not quite clear how. And... asking John Roberts these questions and basically saying, and she's posing as a Christian conservative herself. And listen to the way that John Roberts responds in a way that I think is like what is indicative of a judicial temperament.
I did want to ask you, specifically, with everything that's going on right now, it's a very tumultuous time in the country, and I'm just curious, from your perspective on the court, how do we start to repair the polarization?
Well, the first thing I think is to tell me when the non-tumultuous time has been here. You look at the court, what the court was doing in the 60s, the court was doing during the New Deal, what the court was doing, after Dred Scott and all this. It's kind of a regular thing. People think it's so different and special. It's been pretty tumultuous for a long time.
So you think this is a normal period?
I don't know if it's normal. Since I've been here 20 years, there have been quieter times. But the idea that the court is in the middle of a lot of tumultuous stuff going on, that's nothing new.
I guess I wouldn't say that it's not like it's an innovative thing. It's not new. I guess I really feel like we're at a point in our country where the polarization is so extreme that it might be irreparable.
Oh, I don't think that.
I think
it's extreme. It's like the Civil War. We did that during Vietnam. People were getting killed I was there in Vietnam. This is all right. It's not all right, but it's not like it's as dramatically different. It's a common thing. People with their own perspective think this is so extraordinary. I don't know.
But you don't think there's a role for the court in guiding us toward a more moral path?
No, I think the role for the court is deciding the cases. If I start, would you want me to be in charge of guiding us toward a more moral path? That's for the people we elect. That's not for lawyers.
Well, I guess I believe that the founders who are godly, we're Christians, and I think that we live in a Christian nation, and that our Supreme Court should be guiding us in that path.
Yeah, I don't know that we live in a Christian nation. I know a lot of Jewish and Muslim friends who would say maybe not, and it's not our job to do that. It's our job to decide the cases as best we can.
Well,
What's more modest job than other people?
I don't have monopolize your time. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Not at all.
Thank you so much.
All right, you know what? That's a fairly normal response.
I could have answered the same way.
Yeah, pretty close, right? I think pretty close. I would have been a little bit more alarmist by people like her,
Right.
that she was portraying to me. But, I'm not a Supreme Court justice. This guy responded in the way that, I hope he feels in his head. But B, even if he doesn't feel that way, understands that he's a Supreme Court justice. And I'm not like some dude who, calls into Mark Levin's show. I'm a Supreme Court justice. I know this is, this isn't like a cocktail party at his house. It's it's not a public event. You got to buy tickets.
Right.
But that's the responsible way a normal, well-adjusted person responds when they are one of the most powerful people in the country, maybe one of the 9 most powerful people, one of the 10, 12,
Right.
12, 13 most powerful people who aren't billionaires, frankly, in this country. Now, let's listen to what a lunatic who who also happens to be a Supreme Court justice, sounds like. This is Sam Alito.
To a random stranger, by the way.
Yeah, well, to be fair, she says, I met you last year.
Right. Okay.
And it's at like a conservative event, so.
This is not a conservative event.
No, it's a Supreme Court
This
event.
is a Supreme Court Historical Society gala.
Right, okay.
So it's just a random citizen who, of course, could afford the fee, which I would imagine was quite expensive. But this guy's a lunatic.
Hi, I wanted to say hello to you again. My name's Lauren. I met you last year. I think you already met. So anyway, I wanted to tell you, my husband wanted to be here, but it last minute business thing, and just like make sure that you tell Justice Alito that like he is a fighter and we appreciate him and he has all the grit, and I know it's got to be terrible what you and your family are going through right now, so I'm just so sorry.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
But, and I'm sure you don't remember this at all, but what I'd asked you about was about the polarization in this country, about, like, how do we repair that rift? And considering everything that's been going on in the past year, you know, as a Catholic and as someone who, like, really cherishes my faith, I don't know that we can negotiate with the left in the way that like needs to happen for the polarization to end. I think that it's a matter of like winning.
Pause it. So she set up this dynamic.
Yeah.
That the country is polarized, and I'm on the right, and it's the left. I don't think we can negotiate with the left. Now she's talking to a Supreme Court justice.
Yep.
There used to be a thing that they would talk about, judicial temperament. That if you talk to anybody who's a lawyer over the age of 50, and you talk to them about a judge, what's the most important thing? They've got to be smart and have judicial temperament. That's what they'll all say. And judicial temperament, when you're talking about like polarization, the way you respond to that with Roberts, it goes like, it's really not that bad.
Right.
I mean, we've had a civil war in this country. Vietnam almost tore us apart. The New Deal was, you know, we had almost people, there was almost an attempted coup with FDR. I mean, anybody who has like any type of sense, and I'm not even talking about like you need to be intellectual, so, you know, it's a heavyweight. You need to be like a middling, of intellect, have some vague notion of the history of the country, and just not be a lunatic. And if you're a Supreme Court justice, you should think that you should surpass that bar. Well, here's how he responds.
It is a matter of like winning.
I think you're probably right. I think one side or the other is going to win. I don't know. I mean, there can be a way of living together peacefully, but it's difficult, you know, because there are differences on.
Pause it for 1 second. This guy's now saying that there can be a way to live peacefully. Like, what is it that he imagines is going down? We're in like Tim Pool level now, prognostications.
Oh, yeah.
As to where we're going. And he says, but it's difficult. All right, go back a little bit, because I want people to like hear where he's going with this. This is really disturbing. I don't know that it's anything terribly different than we had speculated.
Right.
But it's one thing to be speculating about this stuff, sitting in my chair speculating about it. It's another to have him so wedded to this worldview that he feels comfortable talking about it to a total stranger who has said, really, I think you're great, and you got a lot of grit. You're a great fighter. I'm a fundamentalist Catholic. I know you are too. And then off to the races.
I mean, there can be a way of living together peacefully, but it's different, because there are differences on fundamental things that really can't be compromised. Really can't be compromised. So it's not like we're going to split the difference.
And that's what I'm saying. I think that the solution really is like winning the moral argument. Like people in this country who believe in God have got to keep fighting for that to return our country to a place of godliness.
Oh, I agree with you.
Can we pause that for a sec? Just leave that up on the screen, that quote. I want to return the country to a place of godliness. There, can we just go back 5 seconds so we can look at the quote? I like people in this country who believe in God have got to keep fighting for that, to return our country to a place of godliness. That's what undercover, Lauren says. He says, I agree with you. I agree with you. And then you just get that is all you need to see right there. That's Justice Alito essentially saying that the country needs to return to a place of Christian values. Or what does godliness means? I mean, you can interpret it in a variety of different ways, but oftentimes it just means to a more conservative mindset that can include things from like controlling women's reproductive health to anti-LGBTQ stuff to white supremacy. It can mean a lot of different things.
Well, let's just remember what Roberts said. Roberts pushed back on this notion of like, that's not our job.
Yep.
It's not our job. And I don't think I don't think that's what we're supposed to do. Meanwhile, he's talking about, and I hope that Joe Biden hears this, there are fundamental things that can't be compromised. For a long time, we heard from so-called moderate Democrats, conservative Democrats, Hillary Clinton back in 2004, we need to compromise over this whole abortion thing. We can find a middle ground. There is no middle ground with these people. There is no middle ground with these people. They are not looking to reduce teen pregnancies, which we were told back in the 1990s and the aughts. They're not looking to reduce the number of abortions. They're looking to take away the right of people to get abortions, period. And then they're going to take away the right for people to control their reproductive systems, period. That's what's going on here. I mean, there was a clip from Turning Point's memo. Maybe I didn't send that, where you had someone up there, Turning Point's USA, sorry, woman advocating, we need to stop, you need to stop having sex. You need to stop taking birth control. We need to get rid of this stuff. We need to go back to allowing God to control your bodies. This is not hypothetical. This is not, hysterical. This is a Supreme Court justice who's saying, yes, I agree with you. We got to get back to godliness in this country. In fact, he agrees with her so much, he has to say it twice. Go ahead.
Believe in God, have got to keep fighting for that to return our country to a place of godliness.
Oh, I agree with you.
Because we look at like the decline of our society, the decline of the nuclear family, and liberals, I just feel like, want to see that happen and proliferate. And I think we've been too permissive to say, okay, I understand the Constitution. I understand. I didn't want to interrupt.
Somebody interrupted. All right, there's no more of this.
Then it goes back to 2023.
And there's no more of that conversation. Okay. So there's Justice Alito, saved by the bell, essentially, in many respects. I was very curious to hear what he was going to say after that point. But,
right. It was revelatory, but perhaps not as unhinged as her conversation with his wife.
Well, that's a high bar.
Yeah.
Because this guy's going on, and here is... so Lauren Windsor She has recorded Alito. She has recorded Roberts. Roberts gives answers that you would anticipate from a Supreme Court justice. Alito wants to return this country to godliness. So she heads over to Martha Ann Alito. Now, Sam Alito was appointed, in 2005, I think it was, by Bush, or 6. That's where his confirmation hearings are. And so I just want to say that for context, because Martha Alito is apparently still driven by an article that was written about her in 2006.
About her fashion choices.
About her fashion choices. Now, I'm not saying if you're married to an unhinged person, you are necessarily unhinged. I would never, ever say anything like that. But Alito has given us a little clue as to where he's at. We also know that Alito, by all accounts, leaked information to the Wall Street Journal about the ACA case back in 2012 because he was mad with John Roberts. And then somebody leaked the Dobbs thing that he wrote to the Wall Street Journal. In a way of jamming, essentially, some of the Supreme Court justices who were obviously in the midst of negotiations with John Roberts to try and split the difference a little bit. But remember, Alito says we have fundamental disagreements that cannot be compromised on.
Right.
So that's pretty consistent with trying to inhibit John Roberts from compromising on the Dobbs ruling. So I'm not saying that Sam Alito is unhinged because Martha Alito is unhinged. I'm saying Sam Alito is unhinged because Sam Alito is unhinged. And so is Martha. Here is Lauren Windsor.
Shared values.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, are you Miss Alito? I am. Hi, my name's Lauren. I just met these ladies tonight, but I'm a huge fan of your husband, and everything that you're going through, I just want to tell you that, it's okay. Yeah. It's okay. It's not okay, though. It's not okay. It's okay. It's okay because if they come back to me, I'll get them. I'm going to be liberated, and I'm going to... What do you mean by gay? There's a 5-year...
Pause it for 1 second.
28 seconds in.
Okay. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm going to get revenge.
Don't you worry, I'm going to get them.
This is really important to listen to because there's a lot of things that is revelatory here. First off, Martha Alito is ready to seek revenge on those neighbors. And she's like, what do you mean? And she's about to say, there's a 5-year statute of limitations on defamation. So we are now in 2024. She can't get at them now, but she's convinced that she can get at them within 5 years. So Sam Alito is planning to retire when Donald Trump becomes president.
Oh, that's a great read.
That's what's happening. He wants to be replaced by somebody much younger, and it's going to be Alito times 2 in terms of lunacy. Absolutely guaranteed on that. And I suspect if they've got Alito leaving, they're going to have Thomas leave too. Now, will they leave if Biden's the president? I doubt it. I doubt it, but it's going to be hard for them to hang on. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But this is already a conversation she has had because she's not thinking about the 5-year defamation statute of limitations if she doesn't think she's going to do that. I mean, she's staying up at night plotting this out.
Well, do you think that when she says them, she's referring to the neighbors or to the media? I think she's referring to the media based on what she says next.
It could be. Either way, whoever it is that she's going to get back.
Because she then goes on to talk about this fashion critic, right? Who at the time, I believe, was working for the Washington Post and is now at the New York Times. Or Bradley, could you look that up? I forget where. Robin Givhan, this particular piece that she's referencing, which Bob Silverman pointed out, and we don't need to get into it, but it's not flaming her for her fashion choices at all. It's just talking about them. But putting that aside for a second, the fact that that's coming out of her mouth in the next sentence means I think she's talking about the mainstream press.
It could be the press. Here we go.
Hey, it's okay. It's okay because if they come back to me, I'll get them. I'm going to be liberated, and
What do you mean by gay?
there's a 5-year defamation statute of limitations.
I don't know what you mean by gay. Like oh, okay.
Come on, I'll get you. Come on. You know, I was denigrated early on when we first came to town, and the woman then won a Pulitzer Prize. She was commenting on my clothes. She said that I wore a baby blanket one day, and the next time I had on a lazy boy recliner pattern suit. And so when she won her Pulitzer, I called her up and I said, "Hello, is this Robin Gavin of the New York Times?" She
Pause
said,
it for 1 second. I just want to remind you, we are not, like 40 seconds into a minute and a half, and she is already laid out, quoted the things from a article about her 18 years earlier to a total stranger.
Yep.
I mean, just imagine that you're out and you sit down next to somebody at a restaurant. You're out with your significant other, and you're meeting somebody else's significant. Hi, nice to meet you. How have you been? I heard that you've gone through a rough time. Oh, you bet I have. And then just unload.
Yeah.
Never mind. I'm the Supreme Court Justice's wife. Like, none of that, like, we're at a gala. In fact, when you sit down with that other couple, at least there's like some connection there. This is just a random stranger, and the only connection is, I think your husband's wonderful, and you're being attacked.
I mean,
off to the races.
Off to the races. I mean, I'm sure she was well served at the gala, which maybe made her a little bit more willing to speak there. But like, that article talks about how she had something on that was baby blue. It's not critical of her. It's just about her fashion choices. I don't find fashion reporting to be like the most important thing in the world, but she places her importance in it so like narcissistically above everything else, where this reporter won a Pulitzer for her fashion reporting, but she's saying it was because she went after her. Yeah, I got news for Martha and Alito here. This reporter didn't just cover the Supreme Court in this one article in the year that she won the Pulitzer. She was doing fashion reporting about a bunch of other people, but she thinks it's because the rest of the liberal media was so intoxicated by how she wrote about my fashion choices, that's why they gave her the Pulitzer, because that's what they do. They come after us. 18 years ago. Yep.
18 years ago. She has been her husband has been one of the most powerful human beings on earth for 18 years, and 90 seconds into a conversation with a total stranger, she is listing off how she was wronged in an article.
It said her clothes are more Red Book than Vogue, more main floor than designer salon. Disgusting. There was something charmingly awkward about her blue cardigan, a cable knit cardigan at a Senate hearing. The sweater has all those connotations of Dan Rather informality, softness, ease, and grandmotherly coziness. And then ... The sweater was also baby blue, which I guess is what she's referring to there. But like, can you imagine? It's just, she's harboring that for that long of a period of time.
I mean, those are fire lines. I see why the author won a Pulitzer, especially if they did call it a baby blanket, which is...
Well, Gavin refers to it as baby blue, like a security blanket.
Okay.
And remember, it says remember Linus. Like, it's something. It's kind of like it's an allusion that like to like the color. But again, it's florid prose. It's not like she's not being like it looked like crap.
This isn't Fashion Police, that show used to with Joan Rivers on E. Where they used to tear people up.
If I wrote a line like that and the person was still stewing on it.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Dozen and a half years later.
God. I would have reached the pinnacle of writing. Go ahead.
Won her Pulitzer. I called her up and I said, "Hello, is this Robin Gavin of the New York Times?" Yes, it is. I said, "Oh, I'm so proud of you. You're I said to her, you know, it's a beautiful day. It's April 2006. I said, maybe we'll go outside today in New York. It's really beautiful. Take a walk and enjoy life. She never came after me again, but she went after Jane Roberts again. That's why she got the poster between Jane and me, criticizing the clothes that Jane put the children in and the clothes that we wore.
But why do you think they're coming after you?
They are.
Pause it for 1 second. I just want to say that, like, honestly, like, this is so too.
You can't even make it up.
I'm so flabbergasted as to her proximity to the amount of power that she is close to. I mean, I've met people who are loons in this way, but never who have been so close to so much power.
Like, she's like, did Cruella de Vil have friends in 101 Dalmatians? Because that's what this seems like. Just
she may have had a sidekick, but
how many times do you think she's told that story about calling up that reporter?
it's not even a good burn. It's just like, also,
story.
I thought it was Balenciaga, but
Balenciaga?
I mean, I'm not, I guess, somebody who gives a crap about what people wear, but it's as if, like, it's a modern day update on a Jane Austen snob character, right? I mean, that's what she sounds like.
It's
the petty, almost like palace gossip of it all, about how her children's clothes and the other Supreme Court justices' wives' clothes. I think that's who she's referring to. Roberts'
yeah, she's talking
wife.
to Roberts. Apparently, the woman wrote about Roberts' clothes after that or something. But
I mean, this article's old enough to vote.
God.
And the clothes that we wore.
But why do you think they're coming after you?
They are.
I mean, like, the whole, like, appeal to have a heaven flag was, like, bullshit, right?
Right. But that's, you know, the other thing is the fem-Nazis believe that he should control me.
Yeah.
So we'll go to hell. He never controls me.
Pause it for 1 second. So the feminazis believe that he should control me. I'll tell you where she learned feminazis from when she listened to Rush Limbaugh until the day he died. That's where she got that.
Oh,
from.
yeah.
This is all, this is your standard Rush Limbaugh listener. And she's saying he does not control me. I mean, this is the one moment where I have a little bit of sympathy for Sam Alito. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we'll go to hell. He never controls me.
But, like, I have the same flag.
Yeah, I know.
No, but, like, a lot of people fly that fucking flag.
Don't worry about it, baby.
I'm sorry. I should watch my language.
It's all right.
I'm sorry. I did not mean.
It's okay. It's okay.
No, but it makes me so angry.
Don't get angry.
It makes me so angry.
Get angry. Bye, baby. Bye, cat. Meow, 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 meow. Meow, mew. She's a bad girl.
Cat's escort, Lewis.
Hi, Lewis. Good to see you.
Likewise.
I'm Natasha. Nice to meet you. Hi, Natasha. Yes, we're never going back to Wounded Warriors, I'm afraid.
Isn't that awful, though? Why?
Oh, because of
fewer
the security, and all that. It's good we did that. We did that. Wonderful. You know.
You really did? Something to be really proud of. You know that they created and ran the Wounded Warriors program here?
You would never know that because of how they're trying to
Oh,
persecute.
ignore all that. The reality
I don't need their approval for anything in my life. I need nothing from them.
You don't, but the problem is that they use you to fucking. Pardon my language. Pardon my language.
Your buyer.
Lewis, I like you.
You deserve it. Thank you.
Take care.
They're persecuting you, and you're like a convenient stand-in for anybody who's religious.
I'm German. I'm in Germany. My heritage is German. You come after me, I'm going to give it back to you. And there will be a way. It doesn't have to be now, but there will be a way. They will know. Don't worry about it. God, you read the Bible. Psalm 27 is my song. Mine. Psalm 27. The Lord is my God and my rock. Of whom shall I be afraid?
I love that you have that attitude because that's more of what we need. I was telling your husband, I was like, it
hear what she said? They feel. They feel, they don't think. The left feels. This is like...
Facts over feeling.
This is like Ben Shapiro level. Like, this is...
Yeah.
Well, are we going to skate over what she said about her German heritage? Look at me.
I'm
German.
I don't know what it means, but it could mean meow, 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 I'm a Nazi.
Yeah, I don't understand. I come from a German family. I've never been like, when people get us, we get them back. Like, what?
I don't know. That's some story I feel like she's told herself as to like what justifies it as opposed to her own personal lunacy.
Like, go kaput.
It's ethnically,
might as well say Teutonic.
It's in my genes,
yeah,
yes.
Like she's like Teddy Roosevelt or something.
Go ahead.
Just win. They feel. They don't think. No, but you have to win. And if we want to take this country back to like a godly place, to a moral place, that means that we actually have to just pardon my language again, I'm so sorry.
You know what I want? I want a Sacred Heart of Jesus flag, because I have to look across the lagoon at the Pride flag for the next month.
Exactly.
And he's like, oh, please don't put up a flag. I said, I won't do it because I'm deferring to you. But when you are free of this nonsense, I'm putting it up, and I'm going to send them a message every day. Maybe every week I'll be changing the flags.
Pause it for 1 second. Just a reminder, the idea that there seems to have been a plan for when you're free of this nonsense. Incidentally, the nonsense is sitting on the Supreme Court as a Supreme Court justice. That's the nonsense that she's referring to. I can't wait until you're no longer one of the 9 most powerful human beings, maybe on the planet. Let's,
outside
the
of
top
money.
50, let's just say.
Okay.
In terms of influencing the structure of society, so that I can put up flags as a way of fighting back against the rainbow flag across the lagoon. Go ahead.
I'm going to send them a message every day. Maybe every week I'll be changing the flags. There'll be all kinds I made a flag in my head. This is how I satisfy myself. I made a flag. It's white. It has yellow and orange flames around it. And in the middle is the word vergogna. Vergogna in Italian means shame. Vergogna. V-E-R-G-O-G-N-A. Vergogna. Shame, shame, shame on you. Anyway.
Well, I just wanted to let you know you have a lot of people rooting for you. Thank you so much.
You know what's funny there? It almost feels like Lauren got nervous.
I was going to say,
I gotta get the hell out of here.
Lauren Windsor ended the conversation. She could have probably been there for another 45 minutes.
Yeah, right. This woman's a lunatic. I have it in my head. It's flames, it's orange, it's white, it's called vergogna.
I can even spell it out for you.
Slowly backing
Incidentally,
away.
this is my idea. I don't want to see this flag anywhere else until the day I fly it myself.
I've been creating all these different templates.
Vergogna.
The corkboard.
Look at me.
Vergogna.
Vergogna. Vergogna.
All of a sudden, Lauren Windsor looks around and the entire room's empty and she's locked in with
You're going to help me make this flag, Lauren.
I've got to get out of here. Oh, my God.
Stitching it together, stitch by stitch, stitch by stitch.
Vergogna. Vergogna.
I'm going to show you my special flag. If you only fly at midnight.
But if you're at the bus stop and someone was like, look at me, I'm German. I would be like, I have to get out of here.
Sam, you've got to resign from the Supreme Court. I need to build my flag.
Also,
Vergogna! Vergogna!
Speaking of Germany, Italy.
Just unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
I feel so bad for Sam Alito right now. Vergogna! Vergogna!
God, maybe
I don't
we
think
were
you're melodramatic at all.
maybe we were wrong. Maybe she is the crazier one.
Oh, no, she is the crazier one. I think it's quite clear. But,
Lito's managing an impossible situation right now.
Whoa.
Jesus.
I'm just glad she has her flags to occupy her. I mean, God knows what would happen if she didn't have her little hobbies.
I watched the first Omen last night, and that's what that Vergogna part reminded me of.
Yeah, it's really, honestly.
Summoning something.
Folks, I'm going to head to the fun half. God. We got to be mining that thing for drops, please.
Oh no, I'm compiling it.
It's tough because there's a lot of background noise, but yeah.
I mean, not for meow meow meow. That's what I'm adding to my personal little soundboard.
That is amazing. Folks, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member.
Imagine James O'Keefe like backing away from somebody he like that. Like, okay, I think we got enough.
I mean, the Vergonia thing, it sounds like a vampire blood ritual or something, and like you're chained down, and the witch comes. Well, I guess now I'm mixing, but comes over and says, "Vergonia, you'll rue this day."
When I was living in Somerville with Benjamin back in my comedy days, a couple of Seventh-day Adventists knock on the door, and by the time, like 45 minutes later, they're like, "We have to go."
Like, looking at their watch.
We have to go. That's what it felt
like. Oh, I'm getting a phone call. I didn't hear your phone ringing. It's on silent.
Oh,
Laura Windsor's there with the biggest scoop of her life, and she's like, "I gotta get out of here. I'm afraid of this woman."
She gets invited to the second location.
Wait, where are you going? Where are you going? Wait a second. I didn't tell you about the second flag.
Yeah, you can come back to my.
Wait, what about the other flag I made? I only told you about one.
I have so much more I'm ready to spill.
Oh, just get back here.
What is that? The German word for the knife in the back?
Durchschlusslegende.
What about my Durchschlusslegende flag? I didn't tell you about it.
We should check to see if Vergonia actually is like a Nazi thing, and if it's not, we should make T-shirts.
Yeah, I think if you search Mussolini Vergonia, I think you'll probably find something.
But if it's not, we should make Vergonia T-shirts and steal her idea.
Oh, definitely. Oh, we should definitely.
Like with all of the things she describes describes there.
We got to get the flag. We've got to draw the flag.
I know. I mean, honestly, she might truly lose it at that point.
Make a killing on Vergonia flags.
Next year at the same event, Lauren walks up to her and she's like, "There is a 5-year statute of limitations of copyright violation. And I'm going after those people who made the flag with my flag. My flag. Vergonia on them. Vergonia on them." Folks, it's your support that makes this show possible. We could be producing so much more content like this with your help. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.